Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There it is, so you don't miss any of our football content this season. It has been, if I might say, fantastic. All right, Sharper Square, co-host of The Favorites, Chad Millman, all odds provided by DraftKings. So I had a rant today on my very popular syndicated radio show, Millman.
I'm familiar. I've heard it's big.
People are talking. So my take is what you don't want to become is the NBA. A very strong top, a soft middle, and 10 teams to 11 teams at the bottom that are unwatchable and non-competitive. Mostly the Eastern Conference now. And I said, as the NFL has become more quarterback-centric based on a CTE lawsuit and changes of rules pivoting to the offense, that we are getting to be a little NBA-ish in the NFL, a very strong top of 5 or 6 teams, a pretty soft middle of like the Seahawks, Rams, and 9 teams with 2 or 3 wins. Several appear to be soft tanking. And so I have never been prone to big favorites, but Detroit last week at -14 felt like one of the smarter bets. So the Commanders -10.5, though I locked it in at 10 this week on the herd. But I think one team's soft tanking and one team is fighting for a playoff spot. One team is now on a backup and not a great backup. The other team has one of the better rookie quarterbacks in a long time. That team's at home playing for something. I know it's not sharper square, but I like the Commanders here.
Well, yeah, it's not sharp. The way you said it, it's like you're waiting for me to tell you, yeah, you know what, Colin, the wise guys are with you. This is the week where they've decided they love massive divisional favorites. I'm here to tell you they don't. The wise guys like the Cowboys. And part of this is, yes, the number is so big, but there's also some regression from Jaden Daniels, right? He was not very good against the Eagles last week on Thursday night. In fact, since that opening 4-game stretch where he was completing 80% of his passes, he has yet to complete more than 70% of his passes in a game. And so you have to ask yourself, has he started to come back down to earth? Has teams started to figure him out? That's really the key to this game. And look, you can look at what the Cowboys did last week and say, okay, were they competitive in the first half? Yes. Did Cooper Rush show some flashes of being able to be a competitive to competent quarterback in the NFL? Certainly more than a lot of other backups in the league. And frankly, a lot of the starters that we see in the league. But the wise guys are going to be on the Cowboys here because this number in a division game is just too big for a rookie quarterback who's steadily declined as the season has gone on. And by the way, the rookie of the year odds are a great way to look at that, right? How much has Bo Nix crept up in behind Jaden Daniels in the rookie of the year conversation? So the market is starting to recognize some of that.
So I like the Bears +3.5 hosting the Vikings. Lost in the blocked kick was that they thoroughly dominated Green Bay, a well-coached team, that they schemed up layups, easy completions. Chicago looked good. They just didn't finish well. Minnesota, you always talk about the luck ratings. I love Sam Darnold, but boy, they leave a lot of points on the floor. God, I mean, that Jacksonville game was maybe that could have been 40-10. I like Chicago. I think they have limitations, but I watched them against Green Bay, and I like their personnel. Caleb played with confidence. The OC change mattered. Sharper square.
So it's sharp-ish. Don't forget, this line opened at 5. So the wise guys bet it at 5. They bet it at 4.5. They bet it at 4. They're still betting it a little bit at 3, at 3.5. If it gets any further than this, if I'm saying to you, you want to publicly announce you are locking in the Bears at 3.5. You don't want to say you're on the Bears at 3. You're not wrong about Sam Darnold and how lucky he's been. In that game against Tennessee last week, they covered the spread, but not because of anything Sam Darnold did. He had 246 yards passing. 40% of his yards in the air came on 3 passes, right? So he is not having a very good sort of second half of the season, he's been very lucky. The problem for me, and this is where I'm like, I challenge the wise guy perception on this, is they like the Bears largely because they think that Caleb did what you just said. He looked better. He was getting rid of the ball in less than 2.5 seconds.
Yes.
It's the first time he's been doing that, right? Can they really block against a Minnesota Vikings defense that is so much more complex than the Packers? Brian Flores destroys rookie quarterbacks. And Caleb Williams this season, when he is facing a team that has a sack percentage, which is basically the number of defensive plays that end in a sack, when he's facing a team that has a sack percentage of more than 2.2%, he's 1-6. So you're looking at a guy who is facing a team that has a sack percentage of 5.5%. And a lot of times it's not even because they're bringing pressure. They're dropping a lot of guys into covers. They just confuse the heck out of offensive lines and young quarterbacks. So to me, that's really the matchup you have to be careful of. It's why I'm staying away from this game. I just don't think there's any value in this number. Too much bad quarterback play, too much good defensive play.
Cardinals +1 now at the Seahawks. I've said this for the last year. I'm not sure what Seattle is. I think they're well coached. I'm not sure of it. Sometimes they're smartly quarterbacked. Sometimes they're not. I think they'll move DK Metcalf at some point in the near future. He always seems unhappy. I know exactly what Arizona is. Greg Cosell said it on my show this week. They don't, outside of Budda Baker, have great defensive personnel. They are really smartly schemed. And I think this is an offense that is young in spots, that is growing in confidence. I like teams that have an identity as the season goes on. It takes teams time. Even the Patriots, Julian Edelman has said, it took all of our teams time to find the identity. By week 12, some teams still don't have it. Seattle doesn't. Arizona does. Sharp
So
or square.
it's sharp, but it's been bouncing around. And I agree with you about the identity. The Cardinals know exactly who they are, right? They are even on defense, they are still a physical football team.
Yeah.
James Conner is a really violent runner, and they know if they are able to get him the ball and be effective in the running game, that makes Kyler that much more effective in the passing game. And they're just going to be the better team because of those two players, especially against a team like the Seahawks, which just last week before the game against the Niners, they released their leading tackler. Like, that tells you how much they don't know who they are. Is like they're making pretty big personnel moves coming out of a bye in advance of a huge division game. And I would not take anything from the Seahawks win against the Niners. It's another weird sort of circumstance for the Niners with Nick Bosa going out. I think that impacted the game tremendously. So wise guys are with you. The Cardinals on the side, they're pun intended, they're putting the cards on the table here, right? Because they can take significant control of that division coming off a bye with a lot of hype on this team right now. So it's a big step up game for them.
I like Green Bay at home -1.5 now. If Bosa doesn't play, this defense is very good. It's just not. I don't know if it's smartly schemed. It's okay. Fred Warner's numbers are down. Bosa is really the linchpin of the defense. And when he's out and he's banged up consistently, it's not very good. I say this about San Francisco. You are what your record is. They're a 5-5 football team, and they're not very good on special teams. They don't get the consistent pass rush. Brock Purdy is fine. He's not the issue. They miss a deep threat now. Christian McCaffrey's still not at 100%. On the road, Green Bay, the best kind of team to bet. They won and played poorly. You can coach them hard. Green Bay's home, -1.5, sharp or square.
The wise guys are all over the Niners here. The number was a 2.5. They were kind of waiting on the Brock Purdy news because it leaked out that he had a sore shoulder and was going to be day-to-day. He practiced yesterday and looked fine. So it's really not about Nick Bosa here. It was about Brock Purdy. And the wise guys look at the Niners. You just mentioned luck. There's no bigger difference this week in sort of our luck rankings than the Packers, who are at the top of the luck rankings with how lucky they've gotten this year in games they've won. A lot of turnover luck, a lot of blocked kick luck wrapped up in one specific play last week. The Niners have had terrible luck terrible turnovers at the wrong time, terrible injuries at the wrong time in multiple games, right? So you're looking at two teams that are really diametrically opposite in terms of how things have played out for them. And you ask a lot of wise guys, and they'll say they have this game even on the road at Green Bay, power rated to pick. So you're getting a point and a half of value right now on the Niners. So that's why the wise guys like them.
Rams didn't look great, and they have no home field advantage. I like Philly -2.5. It'll be a 60 to 70% Philadelphia crowd. The Rams defense is very interesting, but incredibly young, and they're kind of pedestrian on offense with a quarterback that doesn't move particularly well. I think rosters, it's a mismatch. It'll be actually a semi-home field advantage for Philadelphia. They're humming. I don't have to love Nick Sirianni. They are humming. Saquon Barkley is playing the best football he's ever played in his life. They're pretty healthy. Eagles -2.5. Kind of surprised at the line. I thought it would be bigger.
Well, it's
square.
not bigger because it keeps bouncing around. There's no consensus here. We talked about this on the favorites today, that there's no real wise guy side. They've come in on the Rams when it's at 3. They've come in on the Eagles when it's at 2.5. And that's basically how it's going to go. I'm with you. I love the Eagles here. I've been on the Rams the past 2 weeks. I felt like they were in good spots against the Dolphins, lost it, in good spots against the Pats, won it. The offensive line is not playing well, and they're not protecting Matthew Stafford very, very well. And the key to this team, and you and I have talked about this, Sean McVay, for all of his motion and sort of gadgetry, he likes to run the ball. And that's the strength of this team. I don't see the Rams being able to run the ball against the interior defense of the Eagles, who, by the way, Vic Fangio, brilliant defensive coordinator. Since week 5, the Eagles have gone from 27th in EPA, which is basically a fancy way of saying how many points they're expected to give up on defense on a particular play, to first. Like, this defense has finally figured out what he was trying to teach them, and they're locked in the back of the secondary. Cooper DeJean is one of the top-rated cover cornerbacks according to Pro Football Focus. That should have an impact on what can happen with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. So I'm with you. I like the Eagles here. I think it's a good spot for them.
If you're ever injured, check out Morgan & Morgan. It's America's largest injury law firm, and they are there for you. Over 100 offices nationwide. Think about that. More than 1,000 lawyers with over $20 billion, that's a B, $20 billion recovered for over 500,000 clients. Things happen in life unexpectedly. Submitting an injury claim with Morgan & Morgan is really, really easy. Like, winning in the NFL is hard. We know that quarterbacking in the NFL is hard. Submitting a claim is easy. You're ever injured? Check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/Colin or dial pound law from your cell phone. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting for you to get a full and fair compensation if there's an unexpected accident in your life. And I've had a few. Ravens off a wildly emotional Pittsburgh game go back on the road. The Chargers, we said this a month ago, now that they're healthy, are a really good football team. Special teams, offense. They're resourceful on offense. They're physical on defense. They're getting 2.5. Baltimore does not have like a Pittsburgh, Green Bay, San Francisco crowd, so it will be mostly a Chargers fan base at home. Again, Chargers come off a win, feeling good about themselves and comfortable. The Ravens come off a physical, emotional rivalry game. I like the Chargers plus 2.5 sharper square.
2.5 is not where the wise guys like it. They loved it at 3. I think if you're playing at 2.5, you're kind of tempting fate, right? You would expect this to be a field goal game. We both love the Chargers. We've talked about how much we love the Chargers. We've played the Chargers in multiple spots this season. Defensively, they're great, but who have they really played? We saw a little bit of that Achilles heel against the Bengals when the Bengals did such a good job coming back and probably should have won that game if not for some bad missed kicks and a couple of bad flags. And the Chargers kind of blew it, right? So Can the Chargers do to the Ravens what other teams have done all year, which is beat them in the second half through the air? They have the talent. I think everyone is seeing what's going on with Ladd McConkey and are excited about him as a connection with Justin Herbert. But the Chargers have been terrible in the second half this year. So you're going to have to expect them to do something they haven't done this year in the second half, which is convert. And you're going to have to expect them to do it and basically win the game because you're betting less than the field goal. So at 2.5, it's just not very sharp.
I like the Patriots plus 7.5 at the Dolphins, divisional rivalry game. I think Drake May is finding himself. Miami's one of those teams where you're never quite sure exactly what you get. They blow more opportunities than they should. I think Miami wins this game, but this just feels like an obvious sharp side. New England playing hard, people playing for stuff here. Young team, young coach, young quarterback. They're not playing like they want the number one pick, nor do they need it because they have their quarterback. They're not soft tanking for Shedeur Sanders. They have to upgrade at positions, defensive end and wide receiver, and it's a defensive end wide receiver draft. I like the Patriots to play hard, keep it close.
Yeah, this is an eye test game where at 7.5, the wise guys like the Patriots. There's no doubt about it. And if you've watched the Dolphins the past 2 weeks, they were fine against the Rams. Their defensive line played great. They got to Matthew Stafford.
Yeah.
But the Rams gave that game away. 5 field goals. They couldn't score touchdowns. They were missing snaps. They were throwing, tipped interceptions. They did not play well. And if you look at the game against the Raiders last week, the Dolphins were only up by 5 points with 3.5 minutes left. There was a miracle defensive pass interference against the Raiders that gave the Dolphins the ball and converted a third down for them instead of getting the Raiders the ball back. And that was sort of the end of the game. And they end up scoring 35 points or whatever it is, but they were up by 5 points. The Raiders were going to cover that game, and if they'd gotten the ball back, potentially won that game. So I just haven't been impressed with the Dolphins, whereas I have been really impressed with Drake May. He's just a gamer. And I think the biggest problem for this Patriots team is Gerard Mayo is such a conservative play caller. It doesn't seem to really know how to run the math yet. When you're going for 2, should you go for 1? When do you want to go for it on 4th down? He's coaching like a defensive coordinator in key sort of pivot spots for the game. And that's where the biggest challenge comes in for the Patriots to cover. But the wise guys are with you. They like the 7.5.
I like the Colts at home getting 7.5. Lions, remember, they have to play on Thanksgiving. And they're playing perfect football. The Colts, I thought Anthony Richardson looked as good as he has ever looked. I think they've kind of figured out what he is. Some of that is the Jets aren't very good. But I've been saying this for a month. I like the Colts personnel. Yeah. I really do. I like both of their lines, especially their O-line. They've got playmakers on the outside. I could see the Lions looking ahead to Thanksgiving. They're blowing people out. I'm going to take the Colts plus 7.5 at home.
Couldn't be sharper. Sharpest play of the week. Like the Colts are one of those teams where a lot of wise guys, when they look at this, certainly how I think about it when I'm deciding if I want to bet one of these ugly dogs is, do I believe this is sort of the right side from a number perspective? Is the team they're playing against going to have an overinflated number because they're public, because of what they've been doing? The answer to that is yes. Nobody is winning at a better clip than the Lions. They are the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl. That number is naturally going to be bigger. That's number one. Great. I like the Colts here. Number 2, do I believe there's a part of the game where they can be dominant? You just mentioned their offensive line. Best run blocking unit in the NFL. Jonathan Taylor has been playing great. And I think with Anthony Richardson, I think he played great last week. I think with his ability to run against a defensive front that cannot get pressure since Aiden Hutchinson. They just can't. Every stat will show you they are not a team that's getting a lot of pressure. So that's number 2. I like that. Number 3, there are a ton of trends that back this up. And sometimes trends can be self-fulfilling, but in this case, like you got teams who are road favorites the game after being a double-digit favorite in any location. They've had significant against the spread struggles the past decade. 43% against the spread. Teams that are averaging 33 plus points and a 90% win percentage, those teams in this scenario, 32% against the spread. Like, and if they are coming off a double-digit win, 25% against the spread. There's a lot of matchup reasons, there's a lot of inflation reasons, and there's trend reasons. So checks all the boxes.
Okay, a game I want you to talk me into. Broncos -6 at the Raiders. I know it's a divisional rivalry, but when you have young quarterbacks and young teams growing in confidence, sometimes the market's behind them. Denver's a really interesting team right now. So we know their defense has been exceptional. Bo Nix is making leaps, like big, no turnovers, moving well. Sean Payton texted me this week and he's like, you guys, his arm is way better than anybody understands. Greg Cosell echoed that this week. He's like, he's making NFL elite throws down the middle of the field. Hard, deep throws. Arm is not an issue. Talk me into it. I think the Broncos are the side for me, sharp.
Yeah, that's some of the feedback I've been getting to this week is wise guys continue to be really impressed with the Broncos and feel like they've been emboldened by that Chiefs loss. And we saw it last week, right? Like the wise guys, they were coming all over on the Broncos. They loved the Broncos in that game. And it matched, right? Like it was a Falcons team that was coming in and they were supposed to be a good team, and the Broncos blew them out of the water. Similarly, they're feeling the same way this week about the Raiders. I think the number's gotten too high. It's at 6, and that's because the wise guys have been betting it up. There's no matchup reason to like the Raiders. Like, they're a terrible team. They seem to keep themselves in every game until Gardner Minshew has some ridiculous turnover. He's got 4 lost fumbles this year, which is, I think, second in the NFL. He's got, I think, 9 interceptions, which is third in the NFL. 13 total turnovers. Like, that's the script for this game is Gardner Minshew's down by 12 points, double digits something, has a chance to put his team and get him through the back door, and he does something that costs his team the game, and, he loses the ball, he fumbles, whatever. So you're probably on the right side, but I think you've lost the value in the number.
Okay, and finally, give me a game I missed. I like Kansas City off a loss, -11 at Carolina, but I'll stay away. But I think generally, Andy Reid doesn't lose. Patrick Mahomes doesn't lose, even though he's not a great big favorite. Carolina's a bad team, and Kansas City's pissed off, so I kind of like him. But give me something else.
It's Kansas City and Carolina. I hate to say it. Like, the wise guys like Carolina here. They like what they've seen from Bryce Young in the past 2 weeks that he played. They like the idea that this is also a really good run blocking unit. And while the Chiefs run stopping defense is elite, there's still an opportunity here for the Chiefs. And if they aren't running it very well, they have liked what they've seen. The wise guys have liked what they've seen from Bryce Young and his ability to find the right receivers, especially against the Chiefs secondary that isn't very good. You got to go on the road. Win is a double-digit favorite. It's just a bad spot. And historically, now this year, double-digit favorites are rushing. Like, it's been...
Yes. That's my take at the top of this podcast was we're getting to be the NBA. The difference between Denver and Orlando is significant.
Yes. So let me give you a couple stats here then. If you're going to be talking about this, because it helps illuminate it a little bit. So double-digit favorites are 5-0 this year. It's the first time they've been undefeated, not against the spread, just undefeated this late in the year in 20 seasons. Only the second time in the past 40 seasons. Here's how extraordinary this is, though. They are undefeated against the spread. For that, you have to go back to 1950. That is the last time double-digit favorites were undefeated against the spread through 11 weeks. Let me put this in context for you, Colin. The point spread was less than a decade old in 1950. It was invented in like 1941 by a commodities trader in Chicago. So the last time there was this kind of double-digit cover streak was 1950, and the spread was an infant. It barely existed. That's how unprecedented.
Before that, people were betting pith helmets and bales of hay. I mean, that was
exactly.
Just, what did you do?
And wooden nickels,
stirrups.
You know. So they're going to be on. But the point is, the wise guys are going to be on the Panthers. They're going to bet against the trend. Same thing with the Titans, by the way. They don't love it, but they're going to bet against how bad the Titans have been against the spread. They're going to bet against the inflation you get from the Texans beating the Cowboys in prime time. They haven't been impressed with CJ Stroud this year. They do like the Titans defense. Talk about unlucky. The Titans seem to shoot themselves in the foot every week. So if they can get one of these breaks, that's the difference in a game where the number is more than a touchdown.
Chad Millman, good seeing you, buddy.
You too, brother.